So I recently read, and it stuck with me, a note about restaurants. Have you been out to eat lately? I know, who can afford that these days, right? But have you been into a restaurant lately? Apparently, restaurants have universally taken a new approach to the experience of their dining options. Restaurants have almost universally turned up the radio. Have you noticed this? Have you noticed how loud restaurants are now? The music that used to be in the background has become overwhelmingly loud, and restaurants have across the board kind of committed to this together. And what I read was about why they do this. Any ideas? Do you know why restaurants have increased the volume on the background noise of their stores? It's because they want it to feel like an experience. They want it to feel loud and crowded and like an event and like a lot is going on because people are looking for events, and to them, loudness equals happening, event, something that's an experience, something that will stick with you. And so I've been thinking about it, and to me, there's a certain percentage of people that are famous or that are looked to because they are loud or humorous or all over social media or pushy. We seem to overly value extroverts, which isn't to say that we shouldn't value extroverts, but is to say that we really seem to overvalue them. There's something about loudness making an experience that much better or that much more amplified. But that is not Ed Dicato. That is not how I experienced him, and that is not how I knew him. There is a chance that you don't even remember who Ed is because he's not loud and he's not really a center of attention kind of person, and he's not really an extrovert. And so, what if the foundation of our being is not loudness? What if that's part of it, but what if that's not really the center of who we are? What if life isn't all about the loud, famous people, but about quietness and about contentment and about being a day-to-day person, the person right next door? What if so much of our existence is about those who are other than famous? People with fairly unnoticeable lives and qualities, and that these are the people that make up the real depth or breadth of our world. What if we were to take a few moments to remember Ed, or even to try to bring Ed to mind because we can't remember him, by considering a renewed sense of awareness or connection to that which is other than glitz or volume or famousness or loudness or extroversion. Ed was born on October 26, 1951 in Canton, Ohio, a town near and dear to my heart because I was born in the same place. Ed was a son. He was a husband, a father, a grandfather. Ultimately, he was a professional, a graduate, a man of degrees and success. By the time we met him here at St. Stephen, we came to know him as a man who loved Darlene, who passed away a few years ago, who appreciated dogs, The two of them together loved cruises. Sometimes I would have to dig it out of him when I was visiting him, but his favorite cruise of all time was one to Alaska. They visited dozens and dozens of countries. They went on many cruises together. His favorite was to Alaska, and I'll never forget that towards the end of Darlene's life, Ed was incapacitated for a time, and they had to cancel a cruise that they were hopeful to go on, and they never got to go on it. And so now we can say that Ed and Darlene are on that last cruise they never got to take. Darlene, and then as I knew him, Ed, loved big glasses of wine, filled to the brim in a way I've never quite seen anybody else drink them. And if I'm being honest, he loved smoking, which I guess at the end is part of maybe what attributed to his health issues. And he had appreciation beyond smoking for the show Gunsmoke, which he could talk about in depth. He knew the years it ran, what episodes were in each season, what happened in them. He was a Gunsmoke aficionado, possibly even a Gunsmoke expert. But again, you had to draw that out of him. Because to me, the predominant thing about Ed was his quietness. His calmness, I can say. His quietness for sure. In all honesty, I can't think of any other way to reflect on who he was. But in a world that is loud and pushy, it can be easy to forget the guy next door who's quiet. And so this is a reflection about the other side of life, the other side that gives some depth and breadth to existence. As is always the case, Ed, who lived 72 years, cannot be covered or captured in just this reflection or just my experience of him. I know that Ed was not perfect. I know that there are stories about his relationships with his family, and to be honest, I don't know if I'll ever understand all of the things that happen there, but I need to be clear that I do not mean, and I am not able to paint some picture of some perfect guy that in his quietness just powered through because he was so strong on his own. That's not, maybe the background of a Gunsmoke Western, but there's more to Ed than that, and I know that he wasn't the perfect guy. But I have been reflecting on Ed, who didn't advertise or flash or sell himself to others. And so all I can do is tell you about Ed as I understood him and try to prayerfully talk about what a person like Ed seems to reflect in the totality of God's creation. So I sort of meditate here in the confidence that though he was human and fell short of the glory of God, that there were things about him, a giftedness and a presence that teach us some about the beauty and depth and breadth of God's creation. I've known Ed up and down, more visits, sometimes less visits for a while, and then back to visiting again for 8 years, give or take. I've visited him, and I can tell you that learning about him was not easy. I'm telling you, he was quiet. He was quiet and he did not elaborate. When I met Ed, it was alongside Darlene, who again has now passed. And so she was always there too. And so visiting was easier because Darlene would talk and talk and talk, and about all Ed would do was shake his head or say, uh-huh, and he was content with that. To me, so many other people try to see what they can get off of others. Their energy comes from public exertion, and that isn't who Ed was. Ed was a model of quietness and seldom complained. I can't remember him going on and on ever about anything. He had what seemed like this ability to acknowledge and to accept circumstances and to work towards being content and to expect uh, the best in what he had been given. In the last year or so, Ed's contentment has gone out the window. In visiting him, he grew increasingly discontent. He would say that he wanted to see Darlene again and that he was alone and sad and ready to go. The last time I visited him, he smoked cigarettes out the back patio door while we talked, and I felt like I was grilling him like always. I would ask him as many questions as I could possibly think of, and after an hour of this with very little response, I would get to why I came and why he wanted me there, which was that he wanted communion. He was almost desperate for it. He wanted to believe that God loved him and that there would be some hope for communion with Darlene in the community of saints. And so, after all the grilling, that was really what I was there for. I could have come, given him communion, and left, and he would have been fine with that. To me, Ed was a man of quietness and contentment while Darlene was alive. And he was an example of a person who, as life wore on and weighed on him, faced discontentment. And so, to me, what I'm thinking about is his reaching out, his call, his hope that God would love him in communion and in Christ. And this is a thing that I would remind him of often. And he said that he was so discontent towards the end of his life, and this from a man who I knew to be quiet and so often content. And so in thinking about Ed, you may not even really totally remember who he was. He was just that quiet and that sort of willing to be under the radar, which is so different than the loud experience, be extroverted, be crazy world that we sometimes live in. But in thinking about him, I've been thinking about the sort of back and forth, the balance between contentment and joy and just being and simplicity and quietness, and the fortitude that it takes to face moments of discontent and the year of his discontent. So my hope is that we can be blessed by Ed's memory among us, and that we can consider him a person reaching for God quietly in our midst, and a story about depth and breadth and the full experience of creation in a world that just wants to sell us on being famous or loud or extroverted. And so, to end here, I want to take a minute about being grounded in contentment. I want to take a minute to think about the things that we are content about. I think we do this. I think we enter into something like a literal minute, which I am going to run a stopwatch for, where we consider what we have quietly to ourselves wherever we are. I think we do this to be grounded in God, because discontentment and noise and being pushed and all that are all around us. And to me, the key to enjoying and moving through the noise of this world is also knowing how to appreciate the quiet of it, if that makes sense. And so I have a stopwatch set up here, and it's set for a minute. And in that minute, again, I would like you to think about what you're thankful for. What gives you contentment? And in a minute spent sitting in those things in the memory of Ed, we do so remembering that times may come when we are tempted into discontentment, and that the only thing that might see us through that is God's voice that we heard in minutes like these, where we practiced contentment. And so I'm close to it now. I'm going to press start, and when I do, it's a moment, it's a full minute for you to pray, to be thankful, to sit quietly and just listen to whatever happens around you, whatever the case may be. A minute focused on contentment and just being in a world of louder restaurants in order to ground us and strengthen us for whatever may lie ahead. Ready? Let's do that minute of prayerfulness and contentment starting now. Gracious God, blessed be Ed's memory among us. We thank you for the quiet ones, even in the midst of a world of noise. We ask you that you would give us a heart like Ed's that reaches to you and to your presence in the sacrament and in your word. That you would help us be content when we are able, and that you would be with us and guide us through discontentment. That you would strengthen us in what we've been given to be guided through when we feel lack. Thank you for Ed. Thank you for your love. And we ask for your strength in a noisy world. Amen.